Hi, I'm Dr. Sergio Lita with Que Onda Magazine. Today we have an exclusive interview with Harris County Commissioner Precinct 2, Adrian Garcia. By the way, how are you today?
Real good, Sergio. Thank you for having me.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Listen, just for our readers and viewers on Que Onda Magazine, you've been a public servant for many years, but perhaps some people may not know a little bit about you, who you really are at home, outside of the office. Could you share with us something about you that perhaps people don't know? Do you have a skill? Do you sing in the choir?
Well, if I sing, I cleared the choir. Listen, Sergio, and first of all, thank you and Que Onda for allowing me to share a few thoughts with the community. And it's always an honor and pleasure to be with Que Onda Magazine, an incredible publication for our community, and with their digital platform as well. What people may not know about me is that due to the pandemic, I took on biking.
Oh, wow.
And this is the first bike I've owned since I was a kid.
Wow.
And so I got real antsy because I couldn't go to the gym. I got bored working out at home. And so my wife and I started riding B-cycles during the early part of the pandemic, just to get some fresh air and get out of the house a little bit. And then it went so well. We were really enjoying ourselves that on Black Friday of 2020, I went out and bought us a pair of bikes. And so now we try to do a lot of biking on the weekends. On the weekends, we might average about 30 miles or so.
Wow, that's great.
But I started riding to the office on a daily basis. And on a good week, I would do about anywhere between 180 miles, 80 to 100 miles a week.
Wow. And
then it just kind of occurred to me that I need to ride that bike more just to understand the communities better. And so I tell you what, you get an incredible perspective of what a pothole means to people when you're hitting that pothole on a bicycle. And then you get to see neighborhoods, their drainage systems. You get to see some of the abandoned housing or buildings that people complain about. So it's become a very, very passionate hobby of mine. I like to bike, and so much so that when I travel out of town, I try to find an opportunity to ride. So as an example, I was in New York late last year, and my wife and I rode all through Central Park, and then we rode from Manhattan all the way to Coney Island.
Oh, wow.
And back,
yeah,
35 miles.
Wow.
And we rode over to the Brooklyn Bridge, and I promised my wife an official Coney Island hot dog. But because of the pandemic, Coney Island was closed.
Oh, wow.
So we had to settle for Luigi's Pizza. But so biking is a passion of mine now, but one of the other things that I know people don't really know about me is that I'm trying to be a better cook.
Oh,
I've always.
That's an important skill.
Yeah. So I'm decent with shrimp scampi. I can do a brisket. I can do the barbecue stuff, but I really want to make nicer and delicious meals. So I'm subscribing to chef YouTube things. So maybe Que Onda can put on a nopales class or something. But I really want to learn how to cook.
Yeah.
My wife has always been very, very gracious. She's a phenomenal cook. She got the best of her mother, best of her father, and because her father was the executive sous chef of the Shamrock Hilton Hotel in Houston.
Yeah. I remember that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize, but when Fidel Castro, the president of Cuba, came into power in 1960, he came to Houston. And my father-in-law prepared his meal, and Fidel Castro's bodyguards had my father-in-law taste the food before they would serve the president.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've always wanted to be that kind of chef that can prepare great meals. So right now, I'm just a rookie. I don't even, I'm a cadet. So those are a couple of things about me.
Wonderful. You know, I also like biking. I ride around my neighborhood, and it helps me keep grounded as to the needs of our neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, that's really where the rubber meets the road.
Exactly. It really does. It really does.
You can see, you know, the needs of your community by bike riding. You know, you have a long history as a public servant, as a police officer, on city council, as a sheriff, and now commissioner. What has been your main motivation to serve the public?
You know, Sergio, it's a great question. And I would just tell you that having grown up in the near north side, just outside of downtown U of H, if people are familiar with Papa Burger, that was my old neighborhood. And I saw a great deal of challenges as a kid. A lot of the friends I grew up with are no longer alive today. They lost their lives at a very early age. Some regretfully have long criminal records, and their hopes and dreams have vanished as a result. Some are still living in the same house that we grew up in. And so I've just really wanted to contribute to making the community better. And I remember when I was applying to the Houston Police Department, the lieutenant in the recruiting division that interviewed me was a guy by the name of Art Contreras.
Oh, yes.
And he asked me the proverbial question, why do you want to be a police officer? And my response was, I want to help my community. And he goes, so you don't want to help anybody else? And I said, well, I think, you know, the Anglo community has its advocates. I think the African American community has its advocates. I want to be an advocate for my community. Yes. And so thanks to him, I had the opportunity to have a 23-year career with the Houston Police Department. And it's really been my passion throughout. But everything is really grounded on the 5 guiding principles that my father gave me when I went to tell him that I wanted to be a Houston police officer. Because I was going to be a mechanic with my father. My father had a very good automotive repair business. And it was Garcia and Son, because my oldest brother was already in the business with him. And so my father was already painting the apostrophe S for Garcia and Sons. But when I went to him to tell him that I wanted to join the police department, and really at my mother's urging, my father thought about it for a bit, and then he sat me down and he told me, he goes, mijo, si quieres ser policía, te voy a pedir 5 cosas. Primero, no tengas vergüenza que eres mexicano. No tengas vergüenza que tu nombre es García. No le traigas vergüenza a tu nombre. Sé honesto. Pero más importante que nada, nunca se te olvide de dónde vienes. Wow. So, throughout my career and all the things that I do, those are the guiding principles. Never forgetting where you come from is really what keeps me focused on the many things that I try to get done.
That's very, very powerful. I mean, just listening to you just made me reflect on my own father who passed in my neighborhood growing up, and I'm sure that we can agree that being a public servant is a special calling, and it takes we can be out there making millionaires, millions.
I wish.
But I think that this is a higher calling.
It is.
That it's not rewarded financially. And those guiding principles are beautiful. One day I'll share my father's story, but this is not the time. Now that you are a commissioner of, I think the third largest county in the U.S.
That's right.
What has been one of your greatest accomplishments?
Oh, Sergio, I've been very, very blessed. And throughout all my respective roles, I've been very, very fortunate to have a lot of successes, and but one that really just always touches me, because it's sort of serendipity in how it's impacting my work today, was a young lady, a friend of mine. Her name was Linda Rodriguez, and Linda, regretfully due to diabetes, had become a paraplegic. She began to have amputations.
Right.
And so she was confined to a wheelchair. And she let me know her frustration that it was very difficult for her to get around with MetroLift, because MetroLift at the time wasn't very compassionate, wasn't very patient. And so she made a simple request. She said, if I just had a sidewalk, I could get from my house to the bus stop, which was just at her corner.
Right.
And she said, but it's hard for me just to get out of my driveway, much less get down the street and have to roll her chair down the street with traffic. So I began to research it, and we found a grant that allowed us to construct a sidewalk in front of her house. And it turned out that the contractor had material left over, so he was able to put her a driveway. And then they were kind enough on their own time, their own dime, they rebuilt her wheelchair ramp. And so when the project was completed, I walked into my office, and my staff was sitting around a telephone. And I'm looking at them, and their eyes were teary. One or two of them were crying, and I'm like, what happened? And they're like, Councilman, you got to hear this. And they punched the button, and it's Linda. And Linda is saying, Adrian, I'm calling you because I'm doing wheelies in my driveway. I've just went to the bus stop, and I rode the bus like a normal person.
Wow.
And she says, I never thought elected officials really listened and did anything, but I just want to thank you because I feel normal today.
Wow.
And so you fast forward, and today we built a all-inclusive park, so anybody of any abilities, wheelchair, mentally challenged, has a beautiful park in the Aldine area in which we invested $9 million to make a state-of-the-art park, the only one of its kind in Harris County. And then we're working to bring access to quality health care. The medical center is in our backyard, but people could care less in my precinct because they can't afford it.
Right.
They don't have transportation to get to it.
Or insurance.
Or insurance. You're absolutely right. And so, so Linda has always been an inspiration because I knew her when she didn't have anything amputated from her body. And so addressing the high levels of diabetes that we have in our community, addressing the acute asthma that we have, and the highest rates of cancer in the state we have in Precinct 2.
Wonderful.
And so those are amongst my accomplishments. But you know, it's I guess if you think about it, Sergio, it's really giving a voice and attention to those who never expect anything.
And you know, having that ability as a public servant, you've been able to tackle these problems and find solutions, and this is just an amazing example. But you know, one thing that is the most prime concern in our community, in the whole city, Harris County and Houston, is the issue of crime. It used to be jobs, it used to be other issues, but right now it's crime. And I know that you help implement a program called Shot Spotter, I believe.
That's correct.
And in the Aldine area.
Yeah.
And what are some of the other policies that you have implemented or initiatives to reduce the crime in our community? It is the number one concern.
It absolutely is. And look, I've been a policeman longer than I've been anything else. And so
that gives a very unique perspective
also. It really does. Yes. It really does. While others have a strict policy perspective or business perspective, I really come from public safety.
Right.
And so I've been the advocate for increasing the budgets of all law enforcement and criminal justice in Harris County to unprecedented levels. We now have, since 2019, since I took office, we've added over $120 million, over 130 million into the budgets of the district attorney, into the budgets of the district courts, into the budgets of the sheriff, into the budgets of the constable's offices. We have made sure that public safety wasn't going to be forgotten.
Let's repeat that number again, 130 million?
Over 130 million.
Okay.
I have a document that shows 123 million. But with pay raises that I've brought to the deputies, with even more funding, like creating the VIPER program, the Violent Persons Task Force, which includes the sheriff's office and the constables to go after dangerous, violent individuals who have outstanding felony warrants. It's now a part of that. ShotSpotter came out of my budget. I'm the only precinct in Harris County, the only commissioner who's taken from his budget to implement a pilot project using this kind of technology, a force multiplier. Already made tremendous arrests, recovered guns off the street, and shut down drug operations. So that's just a tip of the iceberg. We have done so much, but we're also investing in the community, because when you do that, you also enhance public safety. I mean, think about it, Sergio. You and I have grown up and lived in neighborhoods where we see abandoned buildings,
yes,
vacant lots, weeded lots. And when you leave those things unaddressed, it just attracts more. In some places, they have referred to it as the broken window syndrome.
Right.
And so we're bringing attention to that. And so I was able to coordinate a strategy to address nuisance abatement of dilapidated buildings in Harris County. Precinct 2 has a number of those that will be demolished and razed, and those lots will be cleaned up, enhancing the community. I even found county property that had been abandoned years prior. No one knew that it was county property, and we've converted it into pocket parks.
Wow.
And so public safety is near and dear, remains near and dear, and I'm proud that I'm in a position that I can support Sheriff Gonzalez and his organization and the other law enforcement officers. Constable Sylvia Trevino is the co-commander of the Violent Persons Task Force. So I'm very proud of their work, and we're just going to do more because the challenges that we've been going through have been really began with Hurricane Harvey.
Yes.
If we'll look out this window, you'll see the criminal justice building that flooded from the top level, the most top level, to the bottom. Not because the water of Hurricane Harvey got up that high, but because Hurricane Harvey did flood the bottom level. It short-circuited the fire extinguishing system.
Yes.
And so the water began to run through the entire building.
Wow.
For several days.
Wow.
And so it shut down that building. This was in 2017. And the building has been under repair since. And then the pandemic occurred, where you couldn't have juries, you couldn't have trials, you couldn't bring people together, and you couldn't invite people just to be considered for jury selection. So it complicated our entire process, and it sent the district attorney having to work in a different building. It was just so many problems, but we have worked to bring attention to it. And then lastly, Sergio, there's been some degree of controversy on whether judges were allowing individuals to be free at low bonds. Well, that, as an old cop, that didn't sit well with me. So I'm the one that created a dashboard.
Yes.
To really see if the judges were doing those things.
Right.
And then guess what? We found out that bail bondsmen were releasing people on pennies. They were giving them a fire sale for their freedom.
Wow.
At our risk, at our detriment.
Absolutely.
So I created a dashboard for that, and
Yes.
then I was also able to create a 10% minimum bail requirement for violent offenders. So, I continue to, as you say, bring the perspective of public safety from the Commissioner's Court, and I'm glad that I've been in this role, because maybe if not for my perspective, we may not have done some of the things that we have done today.
Absolutely. No, your role is very important, and these are some of the things that hopefully they will be continuing to be part of your legacy here.
Exactly.
And you've talked about, things that you have accomplished, things that really stand out in your public service. What would you say one thing accomplishment that stands above all others? And then of course, what has been one of your disappointments? That just makes us, more human.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, look, I've had many disappointments because I'm very competitive because everything I want to do or think about doing, better yet, I want to get done. And unfortunately, it's not always possible to do all those things. And then you want to address all the things that makes a family struggle. And I haven't been able to fix all those things.
Right.
But they've all gotten my attention. So I guess from the standpoint of disappointments is that it's just really that I'm passionate about doing all I can to help everyone. And unfortunately, that's just not realistic, that you can solve every problem.
Right.
People who come to this office who don't even live in the precinct, we still help.
Right.
And so that's just the attitude that I have and the attitude that my team has adopted alongside with me. So I guess that's a little bit of my disappointments. But from a accomplishment standpoint, as a commissioner, I would have to say that, how much time do we have? But I'll give you one that is pretty, I guess, fundamental but critical.
Right.
And that is that Precinct 2, prior to my administration, had a very weak 400,000 linear feet of drainage maintenance completion on a yearly basis. And basically what that means is that the ditches in neighborhoods, only 400,000 feet were done on an annual basis. Well, my team thankfully put together a strategy because I told them that the ditches are really the first line of defense to people's homes from being flooded.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so in the middle of the pandemic, Sergio, my team was able to go from 400,000 linear feet to 1,200,000.
Wow.
And we have done over 1 million linear feet since, and this year we're on track to get there again.
Is this only happening in Precinct 2?
Only in Precinct 2.
Oh, Lord.
Only in Precinct 2. And guess what, Sergio? For a precinct who had record number of floodings since Hurricane Harvey, since 2020, with all the terrible rains that we have had 0 homes reported flooded.
Oh, Lord.
So, it's really it's digging ditches, but it's one of the key roles a commissioner has, and so I'm very proud of that. Sounds very basic, but talk to the homeowner who's been flooded.
Oh no, I've been flooded, so I appreciate that. That's what I was. You're not kidding. I hope these programs are expanded. Some of your other colleagues can
pay attention.
And follow that model.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, let's just a few more questions. You mentioned how other folks from other precincts, they call your office, and that brings to the table the question of diversity, equity, and being inclusive. Do you feel strongly that every department here in Harris County should be more diverse and more inclusive?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're getting there, and I've told that the one office that we probably need to do better at is the office of the county administrator, and I have told Mr. Berry that I expect his office to look as diverse as my office, if not more so, because he's at the tip of the spear, so to speak. But we have done so much better because if you think about it, today, Harris County infrastructure and engineering and transit or transportation is now being managed by people who look like Harris County. Roberto Trevino is now the executive director of the Harris County Toll Road Authority, the first Latino, the first person of color to ever sit in that role. Now, Dr. Tina Peterson is heading up the Harris County Flood Control District, the first woman to ever lead any one of those departments.
Right.
And today, Milton Rahman, Dr. Milton Rahman, is now the county engineer, the first South Asian to ever lead a large engineering organization in the state of Texas and quite possibly in the country.
Wow.
And so tell me that isn't diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I'm very proud of them, but all of our other departments need to be as reflective.
Absolutely.
And I know that in law enforcement, we still need to do better at recruiting Latinos and
Yes.
Latinas.
Absolutely. It seems to be a prevailing problem, but everyone's working towards it and making some gains and working in the right direction.
That's right.
Finally, just a couple of few words to our Que Onda readers and viewers. Would you like to say a few words to them in Español, in Inglés, just to let them know all the great things that are happening here?
Dr. Lita, thank you so much for this conversation. And to all of the Que Onda readers and subscribers and viewers, thank you. But I want to say something special to one person in particular, and that's Mrs. Esparza. Just want to thank you and the vision of your late husband for the creation of Que Onda Magazine. You came in at a very, very interesting time in our history that really provided a vehicle for our viewers and your readers to see themselves in this type of publication. Because if you leave it to other mainstream publications, we don't get to see our names, much less our pictures in them. But Que Onda has done that. Y so, la señora Esparza, la familia Esparza, les quiero dar las gracias por el liderazgo, la visión que tuvieron para traernos una publicación que nos llega a realmente tener el orgullo porque vemos nuestros nombres, nuestras caras y son a través de artículos que son positivos. Así que gracias, and to thank you to Que Onda for always being a friend to Precinct 2.
And thank you for your service and commitment to our community. Muchas gracias.
Igualmente, gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you.